Hello there, everyone. Great to see you. My name is Morgan McLintic, and today I'm joined by Nicole Pytel
Hey, Morgan. Hey, everybody.
and Ian Lipner.
Hey, Morgan. Hey, Nicole.
So today we're going to be talking about why different disciplines of the marketing function are dead. If you open up LinkedIn or Twitter, you will see people declaiming PR is dead, SEO is dead, content marketing is dead, ABM is dead. And, this normally incites the predictable rage and debate, and obviously that's why they're doing it. But some of these topics, PR in particular, has been dying multiple times over the years for various reasons. So what we thought we would do is just sort of unpack a couple of those, what the argument is for and what the argument is against, just so that as we're thinking about where to place our marketing bets, should it be in this discipline? Should it not? And then just sort of the pros and cons a little bit.
Yeah, it's sponsored by Chicken Little today. The sky is apparently falling everywhere you look. So there you go.
Right.
Perfect.
That's right. All right. Why don't we dive in a little bit then? Ian, you've got a long career in PR. During that time, I think it's died 3 or 4 times at least. Why does this keep coming up? Why does PR keep dying?
I think a lot of times when people say PR is dead, they're saying PR is hard. And there's times when it gets harder. And I think those times are when you see changes in media consumption habits, especially when they're rapidly changing. And suddenly your traction just isn't there. Same amount of spins of the engine, and yet you don't get as much traction. And I think that's largely because you need to adjust in that case. And where you think the media are may not be exactly where they are anymore. We see that because of the fragmentation of media. Even recently, we're seeing a diaspora of TechCrunch journalists that are starting their own or joining small independent news sources. And geez, I mean, some of those probably weren't in Muck Rack last week and maybe are in there now. So you've got that. You've got folks and brands folding under other brands and then folding back out, and private equity acquiring or other forms of both contraction and fragmentation. So how do you find them? How do you find the journalists? How do you reach them? That becomes harder. There's going to be folks who are used to doing things one way or using an old media list or the lower edges of the PR ranks that aren't going to be ready for that and ready for those changes, don't have an ongoing conversation with that particular journalist or group of journalists, and so aren't necessarily aware of where they're going. And the truth is that a lot of them are going away. They're joining brands. They're choosing other ways to create content that is maybe not as journalistic per se. And so it's harder to earn that coverage. You got fewer targets. And then even of the media that remain, they are increasingly more likely to look for ways to get revenue out of that content that you want to publish. So they'll point you toward the paid channels more, or otherwise try to find a way to make a living as the media models change. So I think that old tactics, changes in the media, that might give the impression that PR is dead, but it's more likely changing. And during that time of change, it's harder to earn your living. And that's a clarification that I think occurs in this industry. People drop out who weren't that interested to begin with. And if they can't just sort of use the process, they don't know what to do. And those aren't the ones that should remain.
And Nicole, you've been sort of not in the PR industry, but sort of working with startups and adjacent to it. So you sort of got a sort of third-party perspective on this debate. What have you seen when people are saying this just isn't, the juice isn't worth the squeeze here when it comes to PR?
I agree with Ian. It's because they don't know how to make it work. And as being a former journalist and being on the other side, and you're getting inundated with stuff from PR folks that Our joke was always give them a rate card. This is an advertisement. This isn't news.
That's right.
And I think journalists, they get a little jaded when they see things like that pop up all the time. So I think it's like you've got to rise above the noise. And to Ian's point, there are fewer targets to go around. And when they're being inundated, they just don't have the time to go through everything. And it's not hard for something cool to slip through the cracks. So I agree with Ian's point. It's harder. And the ones that haven't seen the impact from it, I think haven't had the right strategy, or maybe haven't had quite the holistic strategy around it. You can't just put a press release out and wait for the world to go and cover it. So it's hard.
The numbers speak for themselves, right? The number of publications out there has been dwindling steadily. Large publications, and advertising has been moving away into digital advertising. And so you have fewer reporters. And at the same time, you have more PR people. It used to be, I don't know what was the number, 3 PR people employed for every reporter. And now it's 7, it's 8. And so you've got a larger number of people targeting a smaller number of reporters. And the conversion is going to be lower as a result. And so you can understand then in that instance, people are like, okay, this is a negative trend. And we saw it when, PR died once when social media came about and everyone said, look, we're all citizen journalists now and brands can disintermediate and go straight to their target audience. We don't need the media. We can just speak directly to them and say whatever we want. And of course, that wasn't true at all. The media evolved, PR evolved to encompass how you communicate over social channels, and the practice and the techniques, the audience has fragmented, of course, but it hasn't vanished. And I would say, despite all the attacks on media and fake news, etc., which are going on, people's consumption of news and the media is as high, if not higher, than ever, as people try and sort of keep pace with and understand what's going on. And so the argument is people are harder to find. And so the returns are lower. And these returns have always been hard to measure, right? Attribution of PR and measurement has been something that, Ian, I know you've been tackling it for decades.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is folks want all their spend to be correlated with getting revenue in return as direct a line as possible. And I could go off on a whole sidebar about an area where the media might have done a better job over the last 10 to 15 years. Because if there were more universal metrics and they were more sort of accessible, there would be more measurability across PR. We all have our own tools, but we're still making sort of a guess at it. We don't see the actual traffic or views. And so that hampers us a little bit. But I also think that, there tends to be this sort of cycle that people go through where they don't think that the work that PR is doing is necessarily even contributing to revenue because everybody is trying to be the one that is, the source. So, and of course, it's a cooperative effort. Even as we were talking about paid media or influencers and their role in terms of the marketing mix, I think the PR folks have started to play more of a role in at least making some recommendations there and certainly making it part of the strategy so that there is more of a holistic view that we can say, hey, we did this other thing here. These things happened and then you got this result, that it's more possible in a integrated marketing world. And I would say that PR has become more integrated with marketing over the last 10 years. And as a result, that's been a way for it to stay alive, if you will.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that then. So we've covered why PR has sort of died because of the changes in the media and there's just, so much demand and a more limited amount of coverage. But Nicole, why would a startup therefore invest in PR?
In a word, awareness. We're having this conversation with our clients a lot lately. It has gotten tremendously harder to be an unknown brand. And let's face it, startups nobody knows who you are unless you're a really big startup. Nobody knows who you are. And it's gotten increasingly harder to go out into the market, even with the most targeted ads that you can run, and get people to instantly convert on a lead gen magnet. That's really the evolution that we're seeing right now, is that brand awareness needs to play a much bigger role in that integrated marketing. And that is where PR comes in. John Miller always talks about this gumball theory. We've all gotten so used to, you put a quarter in, you get an MQL out. That's just not how it is. And it's especially not how it is now. And I think of it in terms, we talk about integrated marketing. I think of PR as that top of the funnel. And if the PR folks can get people onto the website, I'm going to take that baton and I'm going to run with it from a content marketing perspective. We desperately need PR to get more eyeballs on things and to make brands more well known, so that when somebody does see an ad from ABC Startup, they go, oh, I've heard of them. I think they actually do know what they're talking about. I'll go download that lead gen magnet, whereas they might not have before.
To add to that, the vast majority of marketing that people do is very much, here's what I have to say to you. And in the earned media space, in the PR space, it requires that you do a lot of listening and find what people want to find out about. And I think that sort of supply side versus demand side view is healthy for a brand, because everybody can stay in their own echo chamber. Entire niches can be in their own echo chamber, right? We saw, for example, in the cybersecurity area, for years, everyone went with a dark, scary website and a man in a hoodie or a cloak or things like that. And that was a safe choice that people thought, hey, everybody here agrees on this. This aligns with our messaging. And it turned out to be a recipe for sameness that basically made it impossible for most of those brands, if not all of the brands with that sort of point of view and that tone, to stand out. The brands that are willing to do something different need to explain why they're doing something different to the market, right? So you can change your website and go, hey, look, we're friendly and all that. You better explain yourself or people won't take you seriously. And you're not going to be able to do that with a logo or an ad campaign. You need longer form content to fill out the rest of that brand character so people know what they're dealing with. And so they go, okay, you're this kind of brand. You're the brand that's friendly and easy to work with. Or you're the brand that people think of when they think of threats, or so on and so forth. The point being, the longer form content isn't something people are going to consume on their own. They need the breadcrumbs and they need it to help round out that entire image that you're creating with your marketing.
PR has always brought that third-party credibility, and even though you may feel like some journalists' credibility has been undermined, we just look at how governed our whole nation and agenda is by what happens in the news. And you know that that's important and that's where people's attention is. And so you need to be involved with that. And so you do need to be in the media. Those stories are going to be written whether your brand tries to be in those stories or not. And if you don't do it, your competitors are going to be mentioned, because they're going to fill the gap. They're looking for a source on the impact of AI on the oil and gas industry or what have you. And your competitor will be in there. And certainly there has been a fragmentation, but I think, savvy PR programs are quickly finding those newsletters, getting you on those podcasts, incorporating feedback on Reddit or what have you into their programs. And so you just need to do that. And you may not feel that you get a lot of audience for some of these niche publications, but you can reuse those articles. Is how you market those articles and drive your audience to them. I've seen people put the articles in their newsletters. I've seen them share them on social media. People put paid media behind the article to drive the eyeballs of the people that they want to reach. There are a lot of ways that you can use. Your sales team can use these directly. Here's an article so you got to work that coverage because you put so much effort into getting it. And we're talking about proactive media here, but also don't forget, there's crisis. Ian spent years in crisis. Your company can be quickly swept up in a crisis. I don't know, rippling and Deal's just being caught potentially spying on one of its competitors, rippling. This is something that if a prospect reads it, which no doubt they will, is definitely going to cause pause and conversations when it comes to sales. So having an active PR program is a sword and a shield in that instance, Ian. And I'm sure you would feel like, okay, avoiding the negative article is invaluable, right?
Certainly, when a company is in the middle of a communications crisis, there's a different set of goals, and you need folks who understand how to manage that public situation. I would also say that once that acute situation is resolved, there's really only one way to solve for reputational issues, and that is make a lot of good things happen and make sure people see it. So when we talk about, oh, PR is good for search. PR is excellent for search if you have a program in place after a crisis event. We talk a lot about prepping for crisis and all the things that you do, but the only thing that you can do is make it so that Google says, here's the top result instead of that other bad thing that happened. And you got to earn that top result through all the same ways that you always do. And for some crisis clients, that was a key metric is, hey, when will this not be the top result on Google? And those things happen in much smaller bites for most companies, especially startups. The crisis isn't a full-blown public remove the CEO scenario. It could just be somebody misunderstood a feature and they explained your product wrong, and they're not going to retract the article. That still could be the highest ranking article, and it could not be correct. And trying to get the internet to delete the internet is very hard. And a journalist's opinion is a journalist's opinion. So what's the solution? You got to get some other results that are thought of at least by Google on the same level. And guess what? They like news media a lot more than they do random content on your website.
Know who else likes news media? All those great AI search bots that just slurping all of that, all the outputs from PR are going straight into ChatGPT and Perplexity. So it's not just enough to do SEO on your site. You've also got to combine that with your PR effort. I think there's a strong argument that far from being dead, PR is more alive and more important than ever. And to add another argument to that, we're seeing a lot of thought leadership happen on LinkedIn. There's those new ad units we've talked about on this show. But how do you become a thought leader? Well, executive visibility is a key part of a PR program. And, it's not just about putting a few posts on LinkedIn. It takes who's going to shape that whole perspective. That is your comms team. And we just did a couple of episodes on thought leadership, how to become a thought leader, and what even is thought leadership. So I think those two elements alone are putting PR right at the forefront of some of the more modern marketing strategies out there.
Yeah. And I should say, if you want to put that to the test, you'll probably also get to test crisis if you just go ahead and have your CEO just put their thoughts right into LinkedIn without any PR team or comms team. Just see what happens and see if you need PR within 30, 60 days.
Yeah, good gauntlet, good test to be done there. All right, so I think we wanted to sort of red team why PR is dead, why it might still be having a real moment now, and we're obviously a little bit biased on that. But let's keep that going. I want to talk a bit about content marketing, Nicole. Obviously, you're running our content marketing practice, but just steelman the opposite side of this for me. Why are people saying that content marketing is dead?
I would say it's a lack of creativity. One of the main arguments that people make is that content marketing's dead. The internet is full. No matter what you put out, 500 other people have that same thing that they've put out. They all have the listicles and the clickbait and all of the things. Mediocre, low quality content marketing for sure is dead. Absolutely. Especially in a world that is more crowded and people are more pressed for time and they're only going to consume something that feels valuable and feels written with them in mind, be it their pain points and solutions to things that they think are hard. And creating content that does that is hard to do. It's hard to do to stand out above the noise, to take a POV that is somewhat creative, to have formats that are more creative. It is hard. It's evolving. And now that we've got AI out there where anybody with a prompt box thinks that they are now, a content writer, now we've got even more low quality content just flooding the internet and cranking up the noise, which really drives up the need for creativity and authenticity and actual thought leadership. Not like, this is kind of like the synopsis that ChatGPT gave me. Let me polish it up a little bit and put some lipstick on the pig and go publish it somewhere. There's actual thought that needs to go into it. And there's actual thought that needs to go into the strategy, because jumping on the hamster wheel and creating a bunch of content, that's not a strategy. It may make you look good in a QBR to say, hey, we published X number of blog posts. We got this many gated assets out the door. But what did it do at the end of the day? How did it help the business? What did it actually accomplish? Who actually looked at it? Content marketing without kind of that strategic compass and that creativity, that is dead.
I'm already seeing it in even social media posts. I'm seeing phrases in today's fast-paced business world. And to me, it's sort of like a sign of urban decay, if you will, or sort of content decay. They're like sort of boarded up windows on the building with just AI that, if you don't look at it very closely, it looks like a window, but then you're like, hey, that's not a window. That is a board painted silver or whatever. And there's going to create, at first, this sort of loss of trust in content. It's going to be like, okay, I don't know if this is doing anything to the folks who aren't clicking through, if you will. They're looking at their dashboards and going, hey, we're not getting as many leads this way. Maybe we shouldn't be spending even as much as we are on content. And then they follow that spiral downward, I think. But Nicole's absolutely right. It starts with a great idea. And I'm sorry, but I haven't seen many great ideas come out of ChatGPT, at least not novel ideas. You have to sort of make sure that the content that you're creating is actually different enough to keep people there to the end of the sentence. Because I'm clicking away. There's a lot of ways to educate yourself now. And if I get the sense that I'm reading something that is churned out by a machine, I'm like, okay, I'm done with this particular source. So I think the main thing is that lazy content writers are going to go to the wayside.
Right. And one of the other arguments why content marketing is dying is that, look, you're churning out all this content, but people are just not coming to your site because Google is answering the questions for you through overviews or rich snippets, and now with AI search. So you're busy creating these wonderful journeys on your site for your customer, and they're not even coming. They're not even taking the first step. So why should I have this whole content journey and be churning out all this stuff if no one is going to come? That's a pretty solid argument. But then the argument is, right, so therefore I'm going to put less effort into creating those content journeys. I'm going to create it through AI. And it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that no one's coming on this journey, but the journey is really bad and no one wants to go on it. Down the spiral you go.
You've got to create content that AI cannot summarize. It's very easy to do, and we've seen this with some of our own content. Our head of digital, Alistair, he did some great benchmarking research and shared that. And we get traffic from ChatGPT because somebody is saying, what is a good click-through rate on a Google ad? Okay, that's an answer that ChatGPT can just spit out, use us as the source and move on. But if you're creating something that AI can't summarize, let's say you've got a really cool interactive page on your website, or maybe you've got a really cool quiz or assessment that you're using for lead gen, and AI can't summarize that. So yeah, for the basic stuff, like basic definitions and stuff that we would consider more SEO content in terms of glossaries and content anchors and that kind of thing, AI is going to summarize that. And at the end of the day, you just hope that they're using you as the source. But for everything else, you've got to be deeper than AI. And let's face it, we're talking about tech brands. And if I'm going to spend $10,000 or $50,000 on a SaaS product, I'm going to dig deeper than what ChatGPT is telling me. I am going to go to the website. I am going to check out what they have to say. All of the things that we know that B2B buyers do before they talk to sales. And ChatGPT can't give you all of that. It cannot do all of your due diligence for you.
The thing that content marketers are creating is experience. They're not just creating pathways to information. And if the experience is good, people will stay for the content. They'll stay for the information. If I presented you with the synopses of your favorite show or the option to watch your favorite show, you're going to pick the option to watch it, even though you could extract every piece of information that you need from that synopsis, right? So the bigger question is, why should I hang out with you, brand? And I think that's the wider question. We started to get into this in our last week's podcast with Punch about as experience evolves in design in their field, they're evolving along with it. But that's how we have to think about content too. I think we're doing it. We did a great thing with some data, for example, for our client crash plan. We could have just put out regular press release, could have just put out some regular bar graphs and pie graphs, but instead they have a whole experience with the data. When you get to their website to find out not just the information there, but to actually get a sense that you're part of this sort of discovery that they've created, that they've found, that you are among the people that they're describing on this website. And that is having the effect of people spending more time on the website and really associating the brand with not just the information that they're getting, but that whole idea that, hey, this is a brand that does this kind of thing. And that attracts their ICPs because they did all the research in advance on what are the kinds of things that our target market want to do besides get information. In some brands, your ICPs might be really into auto racing. And so things related to that might be really interesting. And another space, your ICP might be super interested in, science fiction. But that goes beyond providing them the information. It's theming it. It's creating a way for them to interact with something that's sort of dry in an exciting way. And that's what our media are trying to do. And you could argue that folks like over at the New York Times, at the Washington Post, create these really immersive, wonderful experiences with information. And brands are starting to pick up on that. Not everybody's got the same budget to do all the same tricks, but the spirit of creating an experience with your information should be there.
That's a great example, Ian. So, Nicole, content marketing is dying because actually people are creating poor content. It's not creative. It's easily summarized by AI, and they're finding that that's just not working. Ian just gave a great example of where it could work. Tell us a little bit about, all right, why content marketing isn't dead. Let's just move on to that side of the coin. Walk us through the argument.
Content marketing is the way that you communicate with the world. What you think and what you know, you can only showcase that through a solid content marketing program. I would argue that some facets of executive visibility are also content marketing. You look at like byline programs, things like that. It all depends on great content. But to go back to Ian's example about, all the cybersecurity companies with the dark website, with the creepy guy in the hoodie, there is this problem of sameness everywhere. And if you want to be different, you have to have that in your content. People have to come to your website and see that you're summarizing your value in a way that is different and that makes sense for them. And you've got the chops to go along with it. You're providing the right insights. You're showcasing the fact that you know what you're talking about. And it's how you're going to build trust. I mean, there's a reason why these studies keep changing. A couple of years ago, it was B2B buyers consumed 5 to 7 pieces of content before talking to sales. Now I think it's up to like 13 pieces of content. That alone tells me that content marketing is not dead. People still don't want to have a conversation with sales too soon. They just don't want to, but they have to do their due diligence. They have to go back to their boss and say, I've chosen this solution because, and I think we should spend budget on it because, and they're sticking their neck out there. And they're not going to do that for a company that has no content, no proof that it knows what it's talking about, no case studies, testimonials, proof of value, pieces of content like that. Even an explainer video, what does your platform actually do? A lot of tech is hard to envision in your head just reading some website copy. So, without the content, why would a buyer stick their neck out for you to their boss and maybe get it wrong and have to be held accountable for that decision in 6 months when you've got a competitor across the street who is pumping out all kinds of content? They're everywhere that they need to be. They've got the full funnel journey, and you can see, okay, they get it. I feel good about them.
It's also something that accumulates over time and becomes a resume, if you will, or a proof point that you can go back and see how a brand has expressed their vision and difference over time. And, obviously people are still Googling in order to figure out, is this brand who they say they are? And I think for all our programs, content is gasoline, right? Like we can create all these different vehicles, but we need the core good idea to fill us up and get us to our next destination. We have those milestones with our clients, but usually there's 3 or 4 big ones for most clients in a year, and them on their own isn't going to do it. So the reason that content is going to keep driving brands is because it's an expression of what's happening right now. That's what it's supposed to be. And that's why it's newsworthy too.
I think as marketers, we like to think that we understand buyer behavior and the buying process. We have our ICP and they go through their, here's the buyer committee and here are all their roles. And we have nice little personas for them. And we give them names and, here are their hobbies. We try and understand them. That exercise is excellent and really worth doing. But every study that you read, whether it's Gartner or whatever, says actually the buyer behavior is completely different. It's non-linear. Other people come into the process and stop it, etc. So the way people buy is different for every different company. And so if you know that and you want to address it and provide as many journeys through that process as possible, you are going to need a lot of content. And for all your different vertical sectors, for all your different solutions, for all of the different people in that buyer journey, at top, middle, and bottom of the funnel, whether they jump from the top back to the bottom and all the way around, you need to have a very full and up-to-date portfolio of content. And then you need to market it. It's called content marketing for a reason. It's not content creation. That is just part of it. And so you need to get it out there, and it needs to be in different formats, because some of us listen to podcasts because we're audio people, and some of us watch videos because we're visual processors. Others like to read and summarize and use ChatGPT to help them decide. And all those journeys are right. And so you've got to provide the content and market it to get it in front of busy people, because we're all busy doing other things. And so if you don't do it, your competitors absolutely will, and they will fill that content journey and they will win the deal. I feel like the more complex the buyer behavior, the more important content marketing is.
Oh, 100%. And you talk about busy people. You know who else is really busy? Your sales team. And unlike marketing, which can automate things and do things at scale, your salespeople have 24 hours in a day. And for every minute they spend educating a prospect, they're not closing deals. So it's the content marketing team's job to get those prospects educated, to warm them, to make sure that they've created content that answers all the right questions, that explains all of the things, that combats the most common objections that sales is getting, so that when sales gets that lead, they don't have to spend their time doing all of that. They can literally just take people over the finish line. They've got people who are warm, that have heard the answers to the questions and like them, who have seen some of the objections and how we combat them, and they're okay with that. There's a lot less arm twisting and a lot less prospect education, and just a lot more closing of deals faster. And the companies with a bigger, more robust, more scalable content funnel, I would bet you tend to have shorter sales cycles because of it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, we talk a little bit about how there's all this sort of unseen decision making, and a lot of it's emotional that people have. And one of the emotions that goes against a good sales environment is when the person arrives there and feels that they are personally uninformed about what they're buying. There's all sorts of negative behaviors that they exhibit. Some people don't want the salesperson to tell them the new thing. They don't trust the new information. They're all your pre-education kind of can help them overcome their emotions of having to tackle something new. But like, even if you go back a little deeper and just to connect it with everything we're saying, this isn't just information that they're getting. This is part of the experience that they're having with your brand, and that the emotions that your brand evoke for them as they're considering you. If you think about, okay, I'm going to go get a sweatshirt. It's either going to be a North Face, a Patagonia, or a Carhartt. You've already got ideas as to what that means. I haven't even told you anything about the sweatshirts, whether they're identical or whatever else. That's how brands are powerful, and they don't get those associations without creating experiences that reinforce their values. And all the things that we're talking about here today are there to give you an opportunity to create an emotional connection with the people you're selling to.
I think that's exactly right. So it's very easy for people to say PR is dead or content marketing is dead, because things are changing. We are living in one of the most exciting times to be a marketer, with the advent of AI and the rapid changing of buyer behaviors. And marketing is hard. So sometimes what worked before doesn't work anymore. The tactics have changed. The outcomes have changed. So it's easy to then say, well, it's hard for me, and therefore this whole practice is dead and it's not working for anyone. And that's just lazy thinking and not true. It means you need to evolve and try new strategies. But the premise of, is the media influential? Are influencers influential? Sounds odd to say. Is social media Of course it is. And thought leadership, is that important? Of course it is. That's the premise of PR. And for content marketing, do your buyers need educating about your product? Do they need to become aware of it? Do they have questions that they want to answer? Do they need proof points to show that it's going to work for their specific problem? Of course it is. And so that's the remit of content marketing. And companies that do PR and content marketing well, both of them are an investment over time, are bound to outperform those that just throw their arms up and say, no, this is too hard. It's not working for me. I'm taking my bags and I'm going home. We would advise to face the challenge and pivot a little bit in your strategies. Of course, it's going to evolve, but both of these practices are hugely impactful and important parts of any marketing promotional mix. All right, that's my TED Talk about that. And so, Ian and Nicole, thanks so much for your time sort of unpacking this. I do think it's a really valid debate, and we should always be looking at, is this still worth investing in, and how are these changing? And so just red teaming the whole process a little bit helps you sort of solidify the arguments in your mind for why you should actually do that. So hopefully that was useful for you as our listeners. So if you did like this, then please do drop us a comment or subscribe on YouTube or follow us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for your time. Ian, Nicole, thanks for all your input today. Great to see you. And we'll see you all again next week.